We all have this implicit trust in the sanctuary of our own homes. You lock the front door, you double check the back, you get into bed, and you just sort of assume that the chaos of the outside world is going to stay outside.
Right. It's an essential psychological boundary. A locked door isn't, merely wood and metal.
Hmm.
It's a physical manifestation of our need for control over our environment. It tells our brains, I am safe here. I dictate who enters this space.
Yeah, exactly. It's a baseline assumption we need just to fall asleep at night.
Yeah.
But what happens when someone doesn't just cross that boundary, but actively weaponizes your own sanctuary against you? Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today, our mission is to examine a massive, honestly chilling stack of sources. We've got police affidavits, court documents, investigative journalism pieces, and forensic analyses. We are tracing the decades-long shadow of one of the most prolific and elusive serial predators in the American Southwest, Robert Howard Bruce.
Known to the public as the Ether Man.
Right. And we need to be very upfront with you, the listener, right from the start. Our discussion today is going to be extremely graphic and incredibly detailed.
Yeah, it has to be. To truly understand how this predator operated completely undetected across 4 states for over 20 years, we really cannot look away from the reality of his crimes.
I'm glad you brought that up because we are going to trace a strict timeline of his attacks. We are going to mention his victims by name, and we are going to break down his his modus operandi in minute, uncensored detail.
It is the only way to comprehend the sheer scale of what happened, and more importantly, how he manipulated the environment and the system to get away with it for so long.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Long before the interstate terror, before the chemicals that gave him his nickname, the timeline begins with a young man, a student at the University of Oklahoma in the mid-1980s, who is really just testing out his physical dominance.
Yeah, to understand Bruce's fully realized, highly technical MO later on, we have to look at his baseline. He didn't start out as this, criminal mastermind. In the mid-1980s, his tactics were strictly physical.
Just brute force.
Exactly. He was hunting in Norman, Oklahoma, specifically targeting single college co-eds who lived in off-campus housing. He was figuring out what worked, how environments functioned, and, well, what he could get away with.
The first documented attack really sets a horrifying precedent. It's March 15th, 1985. The victim is a young woman identified as RFH. She's asleep in her own bed, and she is violently woken up by Bruce physically straddling her.
Right.
He pins her arms behind her back, forces handcuffs onto her wrists, and shoves a pillowcase over her head to blind her.
Notice how immediate the shift is, from physical control to psychological domination. While she is restrained and blinded, he begins a severe campaign of psychological abuse. He demands to know her race.
Which is just so bizarre and terrifying.
It is. He asks if she's black, then tells her she is Indian, before using a racial slur. He tells her, I'm raping your Indian-ass bitch.
Yes.
He then rapes her vaginally and forces her to perform oral sex.
It's not just an assault. It's an attempt to completely degrade and, erase her identity. But the detail in the police reports that really stops me in my tracks, and the one that proved his identity decades later, is how he left the scene.
The key.
Yes. After inflicting this massive trauma, he takes the handcuff key and casually leaves it sitting right on the kitchen counter for her to find. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Why leave the key in her house?
It's a classic power reassurance gesture. It's driven by supreme arrogance. By leaving the key out of reach, but in the home, he's essentially telling her, I'm in such complete control of this situation and of your reality that I will dictate exactly when and how you are released.
Wow.
In criminal profiling, this is known as psychological pacing. He is extending the trauma of the event long after he has physically left the building.
He's lingering in her mind, and he doesn't stop. Just a few months later, on July 17th, 1985, we see his methods evolving. The victim is LT.
Right, he realizes he needs a better approach.
Yeah, he figures out he needs to approach these houses without being seen from the street, so he starts using the city drainage ditches to stalk his targets. He uses the ditch that abuts her backyard to approach completely unseen in the dark, and slips in through an unlocked back window.
And once inside, he wakes LT by kissing her.
Ugh. Which is just a grotesque distortion of intimacy.
It really is. It's a calculated jarring of the senses before the violence. When she understandably panics and fights back, he threatens her with a razor, forcing her compliance, and rapes her vaginally.
God.
But what's crucial to understand here is that we know from his 2012 confessions that his original plan was entirely different. He admitted he actually tried to silently cut her panties off while she was dead asleep, but the movement of the fabric woke her up.
So he's already obsessing over this idea of completely silent, unimpeded access to an unconscious victim. Then we move to August 18th, 1987. Victim CH. She's home alone because her roommate is out of town. Bruce somehow knows this schedule. CH wakes up in the middle of the night to find this shadow of a man kneeling at the foot of her bed.
Terrifying.
He lunges, pins her down, violently bends her right arm behind her back, threatens her with handcuffs if she doesn't stop struggling, and rapes her.
When we look at this early Norman phase as a whole, a very specific theme emerges, which is environmental manipulation. Bruce would intentionally unscrew or break porch lights to ensure a pitch-black approach.
Like a stage set.
Right. He stalked the drainage ditches to map out the geography like a military tactician. And he stuck to a highly specific victimology of young, single female students.
I see that, but I'm looking at these early reports and thinking, relying purely on physical strength, pinning women down, wrestling with them in the dark, isn't that incredibly risky?
Highly risky.
A broken porch light only buys you so much time before someone screams or scratches you or gets a good look at your face. How did he expect to sustain this without getting caught?
He couldn't. And that is exactly the realization that shifts his entire methodology. He learns that brute physical subjugation has a fatal flaw.
The victim can fight back.
Yes, the victim has agency. So how does a predator solve the problem of a struggling victim? He removes their consciousness entirely.
Which leads us directly into the next and honestly most notorious era of his crimes. As Bruce moves into the 1990s, he transitions from a physical brawler to a chemical nullifier. He also becomes what criminologists call a commuter offender.
His professional life required extensive travel across the Southwest, providing the perfect camouflage. He leaves Oklahoma and moves to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And from 1991 to 2001, he unleashes a new wave of terror near the University of New Mexico.
Right. During these Albuquerque years, he assaults at least 11 to 12 women. He specifically targets women in the medical profession, maintaining that focus on educated, independent women.
And one notable target during this time was the wife of State Senator Danielle Ivey Soto, who, remarkably, managed to fight him off and escape.
She did. It's an incredible story of survival.
It's important to pause here and look at the systemic landscape of the 1990s. Why was moving across state lines such an effective tactic back then?
Well, because law enforcement databases were incredibly siloed. Today, we assume a fingerprint or a DNA swab in New Mexico instantly talks to a computer in Oklahoma. In the 90s, crossing a state line was practically an invisibility cloak.
Wow.
A commuter offender like Bruce could commit a string of crimes in one jurisdiction, drive 5 hours, and be a completely clean citizen in another. Local police departments simply didn't have the interconnected infrastructure to see the wider pattern.
So he's exploiting the blind spots on the map, but for the vast majority of his victims during this decade, fighting back like the senator's wife wasn't even a physical possibility. We need to talk about the chemistry, because this is how he earned the name the Ether Man.
Yeah, the chemical MO.
He stops wrestling with his victims and starts soaking rags in ether or chloroform, clamping them over the women's faces while they sleep. Can you break down how this actually works on the body?
Sure. So chloroform is a central nervous system depressant. It works by depressing the activity of the brain, specifically targeting the areas that control consciousness and breathing.
Okay.
The margin of error is razor thin. If you give someone slightly too little, they wake up fighting. If you give them slightly too much, you paralyze the respiratory system and they die of asphyxiation.
Jesus.
Bruce was administering these highly volatile chemicals in the dark onto struggling victims. It is exceptionally dangerous.
It's terrifying, but what did that chemical shift give him?
Absolute control. The chemical completely bypassed the struggle phase. Victims reported this sudden, horrifying sensation of suffocating in the dark. But more insidious is the pharmacological side effect.
The amnesia.
Exactly. These chemicals disrupt the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for forming new memories. They induce retrograde amnesia, meaning when the victims finally woke up hours later, their brains hadn't recorded the trauma.
That is just wow.
They couldn't identify him,
Yeah.
and they often couldn't even provide police with a timeline of what had happened to them.
So the trauma is there, but the memory is erased. And here's where his pathology becomes even more twisted. To the outside world, during this entire decade, Robert Howard Bruce was playing the role of the devoted family man. He was married.
But behind closed doors, his domestic life was just another laboratory.
Right. His wife, Joy Lynn Bruce, started noticing a terrifying pattern. After having just 1 or 2 normal drinks at home, she would completely black out.
Yeah, she would wake up the next morning with zero memory of the night.
And later, she discovered a hidden video recording Bruce had made. In the video, he is having sex with her, completely incapacitated, unconscious body.
He was drugging his own wife in their own home. And this obsession with secretly capturing women on camera didn't stop in his bedroom.
No, it escalated.
Between 2000 and 2001, his digital voyeurism spikes. He's walking around public spaces with the camera hidden inside a shopping bag, taking non-consensual upskirt photos of women. He's window peeping through blinds.
And he's uploading these photos to voyeur websites, giving them titles like Shy Neighbor and My First Uppie.
It's crucial to connect these behaviors. Whether he's using a hidden camera at a flea market or chloroform in a bedroom, the underlying drive is identical. It's the continuous commodification of women's bodies. He is stealing their image, their consciousness, and their agency without their knowledge or consent.
It really seems like the chemical erasure of their memory wasn't just a pragmatic tool to avoid getting caught. Stealing their reality was the ultimate form of power for him.
Right, absolutely.
And as we move into the early 2000s, this need for absolute, unimpeded control escalates into highly elaborate, sadistic rituals. Bruce is living in Dallas now, but he starts taking business trips back to Oklahoma.
He rents cars, drives up Interstate 35, and begins a methodology that is just staggering in its technical precision.
Let's examine the attack on December 14th, 2001. The victim is KD. Bruce uses a specialized technique investigators call the heat and punch method.
Yeah, this involves using a small torch to superheat the glass of a window, and then quickly applying a tool, sometimes even ice, to cause a thermal shock.
So it just pops the glass?
Right. This cracks the glass quietly, allowing him to pop a piece out without the loud shatter of a broken pane.
He slips inside and he attacks KD in her bedroom. But he doesn't just use a chemical rag this time. He attacks her with a stun gun. He repeatedly zaps her with thousands of volts of electricity to incapacitate her.
While she's disoriented in agony, he binds her with duct tape and rope. He is fully suited up in a mask and gloves, and he covers her face.
He rapes her vaginally. But pay attention to what happens next because the assault turns highly ritualistic. After the rape, he shaves KD's pubic area. He rubs an unknown, strange green gel onto her skin and inside of her.
It's so bizarre.
And before he leaves, he essentially strips the crime scene. He steals her bed sheets, her mattress cover, her clothing, a washcloth, her robe. Obviously, he's taking away forensic evidence like semen or hairs. But shaving her and taking all the bedding, what is the psychological purpose of that?
It's depersonalization.
Yeah.
By shaving her and removing her clothes and bedsheets, he is stripping away her personal identity and reducing her to a completely blank slate.
Just totally dehumanizing.
Exactly. He is leaving her literally and figuratively bare. It's a profound psychological devastation meant to make her feel like an object rather than a human being.
And his obsession with his own stealth reaches a boiling point. In January 2003, he targets 2 roommates, CY and RAB, at their apartment. He uses the thermal shock method to quietly crack the kitchen window glass. He breaks in while they are dead asleep.
And in this instance, he doesn't physically assault them. Instead, he engages in what can only be described as predatory boasting.
Yeah.
He creeps into CY's bedroom, and while she is heavily asleep, he uses a tool to meticulously cut the crotch out of the panties and outer shorts she is currently wearing. He never wakes her up.
It is horrifying to think about someone standing over you doing that while you sleep, and we know he later bragged to detectives about how proud he was of his confidence and stealth.
He was incredibly proud of it.
The police report notes he admitted he messed with their thermostat to turn the AC on instead of the heat, just to create normal house noise to cover any sounds he made. He even let their cat out the front door, so if the girls woke up and heard a bump, they'd just blame the cat.
That's not just breaking and entering. He is manipulating the temperature, the ambient noise, the pets. He is directing the entire scenario. His need for complete environmental control wasn't just a tactic, it was his defining psychological trait.
Which makes the attack on June 27, 2003 so intensely visceral because the victim disrupts his script. Victim KRS wakes up at 6:20 in the morning feeling intoxicated, drugged by chloroform.
She realizes Bruce has fastened a literal dog collar around her neck.
A dog collar?
Yes. Her wrists are handcuffed to the collar. She has a blindfold over her eyes. He forces her to perform oral sex on him, and she hears the mechanical slides and clicks of a camera. He has set up a video camera on a tripod in her bedroom to record the assault.
He has created his ultimate fantasy environment. Complete objectification with the dog collar, complete sensory deprivation with a blindfold, and a camera to commodify the event.
But KRS shatters his illusion of control. Despite the chemicals and the restraints, she musters an incredible amount of strength. She fights back.
Yes, she does.
She kicks him as hard as she can, knocking him against the wall. She manages to scramble out of the bed, blindfolded and handcuffed, runs into the adjoining bathroom, and locks the door. She waits in terror, listening to him gather his things and flee down the stairs.
Her survival is an unbelievable testament to human will against a freely organized predator. But Bruce doesn't stop. He just keeps refining his methods. October 13, 2004. He actually uses the internet to look up a website featuring University of Oklahoma pom-pom girls, gets an address, and drives from Dallas specifically to target one of them.
He breaks in, standing on a 5-gallon bucket to reach the window.
He enters the bedroom and clamps the chemical rag over the face of the sleeping woman. But he made a mistake. The woman in the room, L.A.K., was not the pom-pom girl he had targeted online. She was a roommate.
And L.A.K. fights for her life. She thrashes wildly. She holds her breath to avoid inhaling the chemical, fighting until her body's biological reflexes literally force her to take a breath, and she blacks out.
Bruce then half carries, half walks her unconscious body out the back door and into the backyard grass to rape her. But while they're in the yard, something spooks him. A noise. A neighbor something breaks his environmental control.
So he abandons her unconscious in the grass, runs to his rental car, and drives all the way back to Dallas.
Following this, we see a rapid, almost frantic escalation of burglaries and entries. In November 2005, he hits homes belonging to TC, KM, and CS using his signature window methods.
And in May 2006, he attempts an entry on a victim, AP, but is thwarted by a home alarm system. This pace culminates just days later, in late May 2006, in Austin, Texas.
He targets a recent University of Texas grad named Pam, and this shows how meticulously he staged his attacks. He checks into a Marriott hotel that is literally 1,000 feet from her back door.
Just right there.
He walks over, breaks in, and uses the chemical rag on her. Pam later described the terrifying sensation of suffocating before losing consciousness. He left her so heavily drugged that she remained passed out for hours. She didn't wake up until the sun was rising.
The staging at the Marriott, the hours-long chemical blackout. This is a predator operating at the absolute peak of his technical ability.
Which brings us to the downfall, and you have to appreciate the incredible, almost cosmic irony of this. Here is a man who executed these minute, high-tech, chemically complex, multi-state assaults for over 20 years. He was a phantom.
And he was completely undone by a clumsy misdemeanor and a massive, explosive overreaction.
Exactly. It happens in 2007. Bruce is living in Pueblo, Colorado. He reverts to his voyeuristic urges. He props a chair up against the outside of a house and stands on it to peep through a woman's bedroom window.
But Pueblo police catch him in the act. Officer Nathan Pruse arrests him and charges him with a misdemeanor, peeping Tom offense.
A misdemeanor. A slap on the wrist compared to what he's actually done over the last 2 decades. Why does a highly organized predator suddenly panic over a peeping Tom charge?
Because by 2007, the systemic landscape had changed. Bruce knew that a conviction, even for a misdemeanor in Colorado, triggered a mandatory DNA swab.
Oh, right.
And he knew his DNA wasn't just evidence of a peeping Tom charge, it was a barcode. Once it was scanned into the national database, it would instantly match the biological evidence left at dozens of unsolved crime scenes across 3 different states.
So, to silence Officer Pruse before he can testify at the misdemeanor trial, Bruce orchestrates a catastrophic escalation. In 2009, he goes to the officer's house, rigs a highly combustible propane tank to the garage, and attempts to blow the house to pieces.
Trying to kill both the officer and his wife.
He essentially built an impenetrable fortress of anonymity for 2 decades, and then panicked and blew the whole thing up with a propane tank because of a window peeping charge.
The bomb plot fails, and Bruce is convicted of 2 counts of attempted murder. He is sentenced to 64 years in a Colorado prison, and inevitably, he's forced to submit his DNA to CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System.
And the board lights up, the barcode scans, hits in Norman, Oklahoma from the 1980s, hits in the Albuquerque Etherman files, hits in Austin, Texas. The ghost finally has a face. In January 2012, Norman detectives travel to the Colorado prison to interview him.
Confronted with the undeniable science of DNA, Bruce's ego takes over completely. Sitting there with his attorney, he opens a laptop, pulls up Google Maps, and starts smugly giving the detectives a guided tour of his crimes.
Unbelievable.
He pinpoints the exact drainage ditches he used in the 80s, the exact entry windows, detailing interactions from decades prior that only the true perpetrator could possibly know.
And that arrogant confession cemented his fate. For the attempted murders in Colorado, he gets 64 years. In New Mexico, for the Albuquerque rapes, he pleads guilty to 9 charges and gets 156 years. And in Oklahoma, he pleads guilty to 18 criminal counts, including 5 counts of first-degree rape, and gets 177 years.
He will die in prison.
The multi-jurisdictional sentencing ensures he will never see the outside of a cell. But while this sounds like a victory for justice, we have to look closely at what it actually took to get him there.
We do. Why does knowing these graphic, minute details matter to you, listening right now? It matters because Robert Howard Bruce's unchecked run exposed massive systemic failures in our justice system.
Yeah, as highlighted in the investigative reporting on this case is a glaring example of how sex offenders exploit jurisdictional borders.
For decades, DNA evidence from these attacks sat in evidence lockers, untested or unshared across state lines. Rural police departments lack the funding and the training to properly handle deeply traumatized victims.
Right.
Many departments lack SAN nurses, medical professionals specifically trained to conduct forensic exams on sexual assault survivors. Bruce survived in the gaps between these fractured, underfunded systems.
Knowing how a commuter offender manipulates an environment, the unscrewed porch lights, the altered thermostats, the surveillance, it empowers communities. It teaches us to recognize the subtle signs of predatory stalking before the window glass ever cracks.
And it leaves us with a deeply unsettling reality to consider. Robert Howard Bruce, for all his technical brilliance, chemical manipulation, and environmental control, was only caught because he made the wildly irrational decision to build a bomb over a peeping Tom charge.
Which forces us to ask a chilling question. How many highly organized commuter offenders are operating right now, hiding in the blind spots between state lines, simply because they haven't made that one fatal mistake yet?